The night on Colony Theta 9 was quiet and cold. Human-built domes stood like glowing shells against the dark purple sky. Inside one of those domes, Evan sat alone in his small living unit, staring at the flickering light of his old data pad. He had been reading the same line for 15 minutes, but his mind was far away. Life on the colony had become dull. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. Every day felt the same, and every night ended in silence. Then there was a knock. 3 soft, slow knocks. They echoed strangely against the metal door. Evan frowned. It was almost midnight. No one visited at this hour. He stood up, walked to the door, and pressed the panel to open it. The hiss of air greeted him, and then he saw her, his neighbor from across the corridor, Lyra. She wasn't human. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the corridor lights. Her silver eyes reflected the soft light like liquid mercury. Her face was delicate but weary, as if carved by sadness. She belonged to the Vayari, an alien race that had joined the human colonies after the Great Accord. The Vayari were graceful and gentle people, but they rarely spoke much with humans. Lyra was even quieter than most. Evan had seen her a few times, walking alone, tending to small glowing plants near her door, sometimes standing on the balcony looking up at the twin moons. He knew she had lost her husband 6 months ago in the mining collapse on the southern ridge. Everyone in the colony knew. Since that day, she had lived in silence, keeping her door shut and lights dim. But tonight, she was standing in front of him, trembling slightly, her hands clasped tightly together. "Evan," she said softly. Her voice had a faint musical tone like a whisper carried on wind. "I need your help." Evan blinked. "My help?" She nodded slowly. Her eyes held something deep, fear, pain, and determination mixed together. "Please, may I come in?" He stepped aside and she walked in carefully, her movements elegant but heavy with grief. She looked around his small apartment, then turned to face him. "I would not disturb you," she said, "but I have no one else to ask." Evan frowned. "What's wrong?" For a moment she didn't speak. Her hands trembled. Then she whispered, "I want to bring my husband home." Evan's heart skipped. He knew what that meant, or thought he did. "You mean his body? From the mine?" Lyra nodded. "They buried the humans together. They said the ground was unstable. They didn't understand my people cannot rest that way. Our spirits must return to our soil or they remain trapped. I have asked, pleaded, but the officials said no. They called it unsafe, unimportant." Her voice shook as she spoke. "But Cale was my soul bond. I cannot leave him lost." Evan didn't know what to say. He wasn't religious and he didn't understand alien beliefs much. But looking at her face, her trembling lips, her tear-filled eyes, he felt a deep ache in his chest. This wasn't about religion. It was about love. "Lyra," he said gently, "you could get in serious trouble if you try to go there. That ridge is off limits." "I know," she said quietly. "That is why I need your help." Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Why me?" "Because you work at the facility," she replied. "You have the access codes. You can open the gate." Her silver eyes met his. "I cannot do it alone," he hesitated. Helping her meant breaking security law. If caught, he could lose his job, or even be exiled from the colony. But then he thought of her husband, buried under cold alien soil, forgotten. He thought of the nights he had seen Lyra sitting in silence, staring at the stars as if waiting for someone who would never return. He couldn't say no. He took a slow breath. "If I help you," he said softly, "what exactly do you want to do?" She looked down, her voice trembling. "I want to find where he fell. I want to take something that belongs to him, a piece of him, to perform the return ceremony. That is all." Evan looked at her again. There was no anger or desperation in her face now, only quiet hope. Hope that maybe love could cross even death. "All right," he finally said. "I'll help you." For a moment she just stared at him as if she didn't believe the words. Then her eyes shimmered with tears and she whispered, "Thank you, Evan. You don't understand what this means." He gave a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe not, but I think I will." As she left his apartment that night, Evan stood by the door for a long time, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps. Something had changed in the air, something quiet but powerful. He didn't know it yet. But that single decision, to help a grieving alien widow, was about to change everything he believed about life, death, and what it meant to be human. The next evening, The colony's artificial sunset dimmed slowly, painting the domes in soft orange light. Evan stood by his window, staring at the horizon. He couldn't stop thinking about what Lyra had said the night before. Her words kept echoing inside his head. I want to bring my husband home. He had promised to help her, and that promise now felt heavy, like a weight resting on his chest. The mining ridge was not just restricted, it was dangerous. The collapse had left the tunnels unstable, filled with sharp debris and toxic gas pockets. Even engineers avoided it. But somehow the image of Lyra's tear-filled eyes made the danger seem small compared to her grief. When he heard the gentle chime at his door, he already knew who it was. Lyra stood there again, dressed in a dark cloak that shimmered faintly under the hallway lights. In her hand she carried a small round object, a Vayari burial orb glowing with a quiet blue pulse. Are you sure you want to do this? Evan asked, her eyes lifted toward him, calm but determined. I have to, she said softly. If I do not bring him back, his spirit will never rest, and neither will mine. Evan nodded slowly. Then we'll leave tonight. As night fell, the colony lights dimmed one by one and silence took over the corridors. Evan packed only what was needed. A respirator, a flashlight, a small toolkit, and a datapad for access codes. Lyra carried her orb, holding it close to her heart like something sacred. They met near the southern gate, a tall metallic door sealed with security locks and guarded by 2 drones. The air was cold, and a faint mist curled around the rocky path leading away from the colony. Evan's hands trembled slightly as he worked on the panel. If the system logs this, I'll lose my clearance, he murmured. Lyra placed her hand gently on his arm. Then we will make sure it does not. Her touch was cool, but it steadied him. For a moment their eyes met, human and Vayari, and the silence between them carried more trust than words ever could. The lock clicked. The gate opened. Cold wind rushed in from the open plains beyond, carrying dust and faint echoes of the mining fields far away. Let's go, Evan said. The ridge was several kilometers away and they walked mostly in silence. The twin moons hung above them, silver and blue, casting ghostly light across the barren land. The path was rough, covered with jagged stones and traces of machinery long abandoned. At one point, Lyra spoke softly, almost to herself. On my world, when someone we love dies, we sing them to sleep. We send their energy back to the stars. But Kale's light, it is trapped here. Evan listened quietly. There was something in her voice, a melody that seemed older than the stars themselves. I'm sorry, he said. We humans, we don't always understand what things mean to others. She looked at him gently. You try. That is what matters. The simple kindness in her words touched him. He hadn't realized how lonely he had been until that moment, how small his life had felt before meeting her. Hours passed before they finally reached the southern ridge. The remains of the old mining site stretched before them, broken metal towers, crushed vehicles, and deep cracks in the rocky ground. Warning beacons flickered faintly in the distance, painting the area in dull red light. Evan stopped, breathing hard. This is it, the site of the collapse. Lyra stood still, her glowing eyes sweeping over the dark valley. Then she knelt down and pressed her palm to the ground. The burial orb in her other hand pulsed brighter, responding to her touch. He is here, she whispered. I can feel him. Evan felt a chill run through him. How? The bond does not end with death, she said softly. Our souls remain connected until one releases the other. He watched as she began to hum, a strange, haunting song in her native tongue. The sound echoed through the valley, soft and sorrowful. Even the wind seemed to pause to listen. When the song ended, she looked at him and said, I will need your help to uncover the resting place. Beneath the central ridge, near the collapsed tunnel. Evan nodded. All right. We'll find him. As they prepared to move, a sudden gust of wind swept across the ridge, scattering dust and debris. In that moment, Evan thought he saw something, a faint shimmer in the air like a figure standing far away among the rocks. But when he blinked, it was gone. He turned to Lyra. Did you see that? She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. Yes, she whispered. He knows we've come. For a long moment, they stood side by side under the alien moonlight, surrounded by silence and loss. Yet somehow, in that lonely place, Evan felt something powerful awakening. Not fear, not guilt, but purpose. He didn't know what awaited them beneath the ridge. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let her face it alone. The cold air bit through Evan's jacket as he followed Lyra down the uneven slope. The ground beneath their boots cracked softly with each step. The ridge stretched out like a scar across the barren land, silent, broken, and heavy with memories. The two moons above cast long, pale shadows over the wreckage. Pieces of machinery lay half buried in dust, twisted metal beams sticking out like bones of a dead world. The smell of rust and earth filled the air. Lyra walked ahead, holding her glowing orb in both hands. Its light pulsed softly, blue and calm, like a living heart guiding their path. Evan followed closely, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He couldn't help but notice how steady she seemed, even in a place filled with ghosts. Her steps were quiet, her movements sure, as if she already knew the way. After some time, they stopped near a collapsed section of the ridge. A deep crack split the ground, leading into a shadowy pit below. "This is where it happened," she whispered. "Cale was stationed here when the tunnel fell." Evan looked around. "Are you sure?" Lyra nodded, eyes closed. "I feel him. His essence still lingers." Evan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "You mean, like a spirit?" "To humans, maybe it feels that way," she said gently. "But to us, it's memory energy. The last trace of what love leaves behind." She knelt by the edge of the pit and placed her hand on the cold ground. The orb in her hand brightened, pulsing faster. Evan crouched beside her. "Lyra, how are we supposed to find anything here? It's just rubble and dust." She turned to him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "Not everything that's gone is lost, Evan. Sometimes we only need to listen." Her voice was soft, yet it held something powerful. Faith. They began to dig carefully, moving small rocks and pieces of broken equipment aside. Every sound echoed through the empty valley. Hours passed, and their hands grew numb from the cold. At one point, Evan stopped and looked at her. "You should rest a bit," but she shook her head. "No, if I stop, I'll start remembering his voice. Then I won't be able to move." He didn't argue. He just kept digging. Then, as his hand brushed through a layer of dust, he felt something smooth and cold beneath it. He froze. "Wait," he said. "I think I found something." Together, they cleared the dirt away, revealing a small metallic band half buried in the rubble. It was shaped like a spiral, engraved with fine, glowing patterns, faintly alive with blue light. Lyra gasped softly. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. "His bond ring," she whispered. "Every Vayari pair shares one. It holds part of our life signal." Evan stared at it. "You mean this was part of him?" She nodded. "Yes, it's more than metal. It's his essence bound to me." Tears welled up in her eyes as she held the ring close to her chest. "He's here. I can feel him." Evan looked at her silently. The way she said it, and with so much love, so much pain, made his throat tighten. He didn't understand everything about her kind, but he knew what loss felt like. And right then, her grief felt almost human. For a long moment, they stood there in silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the orb in her hands. Then suddenly, a faint vibration ran through the ground beneath them. The rocks shifted slightly. Evan's instincts kicked in. "We need to move," he said sharply. "This place isn't stable." But Lyra didn't move. She stayed on her knees, eyes closed, whispering something in her language, a soft chant that sounded like a lullaby. The orb responded, glowing brighter and brighter until it lit the entire ridge in blue light. Evan grabbed her shoulder. "Lyra, we have to go now." She looked up at him, tears glowing on her cheeks. "Just one more moment," she whispered. "He's saying goodbye." Evan froze. He couldn't see what she saw, but he felt something. A warmth spreading through the cold air, a faint pressure in his chest, like an invisible presence passing by. The light around them shimmered, forming a soft outline of a tall figure standing behind her. It lasted only a second, and then the light faded. The wind grew still again. The ridge returned to silence. Lyra slowly stood, holding the ring tightly. Her expression was peaceful now, though tears still ran down her face. "It's done," she said quietly. "He knows I came." Evan nodded, his voice low. "Let's get you back." She smiled faintly, looking up at the sky. "He'll follow the stars home." And for the first time since she lost him, her voice no longer carried only pain. It carried love that had survived even death. As they walked back under the twin moons, Evan looked at her and realized something. Maybe this wasn't about breaking rules or helping an alien. Maybe it was about something far greater, about honoring love that refused to die even in the emptiest corners of the universe. The long walk back from the ridge was silent. The sky above them was slowly changing from violet to soft gray as dawn approached. A thin mist curled around the ground, glowing faintly in the light of the twin moons. Evan kept glancing at Lyra as they walked. She held the bond ring in her hands close to her heart like something sacred. Her face looked calm now, but her eyes shimmered with unspoken emotions. The glowing orb she carried earlier had dimmed to a soft light, as if it too was resting. When they reached the colony gates, Evan used his code to unlock the side passage, the one that avoided security scanners. They stepped quietly inside, careful not to wake anyone. The metallic hallway lights flickered as they passed, their reflections following them like shadows. Once inside the safety of the dome, Evan finally spoke. "Lyra," he said softly, "are you okay?" She nodded, though her voice trembled when she answered. "I'm lighter now, but there is still one thing left." "What thing?" "The ceremony of return," she said. "It must be done before the next cycle ends. Otherwise his essence will fade completely." Evan frowned slightly. "What happens during the ceremony?" She looked at him with quiet sadness. "I will send his energy back to our homeworld soil. It is how we set the soul free." He nodded slowly. "And what do you need me to do?" Lyra's voice softened. "Just stay. Witness it." The Vayari believe that a bond witnessed by another heart, even if not of our kind, becomes stronger in the afterlife. Evan agreed without hesitation. He didn't fully understand it, but he knew this mattered to her. Maybe more than anything else in the world. They reached her apartment as the first artificial sunrise began to glow through the colony's sky dome. Inside, her small home looked different in the dim light, more alive. Strange Vayari crystals glimmered along the walls, casting soft patterns of blue and green across the floor. The air smelled faintly of sweet herbs and rain. She moved gracefully around the room, preparing the space. She set the glowing orb in the center of a circular mark on the floor, a pattern made of fine silver dust. Around it, she placed small stones that pulsed faintly with light. Evan stood quietly by the doorway, watching. There was something peaceful about her movements, like a dancer lost in rhythm. When she finished, she turned toward him and held up the bond ring. It sparkled softly in her palm. "This," she said, "is the last piece of him left in this world." Her voice shook slightly. "It carries part of his memory, his laughter, his warmth, our bond." Evan felt a lump in his throat. "He must have loved you a lot." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "He did. Love among the Vayari is not just emotion, it is shared life. When one dies, the other feels the silence of that heartbeat forever." Evan swallowed hard. "That sounds painful." "It is," she said softly. "But it is also beautiful. It means what we had was real." She knelt in the center of the room, placed the ring gently into the glowing orb, and began to hum. The sound was like nothing Evan had ever heard, soft and haunting, like a song carried by the wind across an empty sea. The lights in the room began to shift, the air trembling faintly. Blue mist rose from the floor, swirling around her. Her voice grew stronger, each word echoing with emotion. "Kale of the Vayari," she whispered in her native tongue. "Return to the soil that birthed you. Rest in the arms of the stars. Remember that I loved you, and I always will." The bond ring inside the orb began to glow brighter until its light filled the room completely. For a heartbeat, Evan thought he saw a shape in the mist, tall and slender with silver eyes full of peace. A faint hand reached out and brushed against Lyra's cheek. Her voice broke with tears. "Goodbye, my love." The figure dissolved into the mist, and the light faded slowly until only the faint glow of the orb remained. Lyra stayed kneeling on the floor, breathing softly. Then her shoulders began to shake. She pressed her hands over her face and cried, not the loud, broken sound of grief, but the quiet kind that comes when a soul finally lets go. Evan moved closer, unsure if he should speak. Finally, he simply sat beside her in silence. He didn't try to comfort her, he just stayed like she asked. Sometimes silence was the greatest comfort of all. After a long while, she looked up at him, eyes red but peaceful. "It's done," she whispered. "He's home now." Evan nodded gently. "Then so are you." She smiled through her tears, a real smile this time. And for the first time since he met her, the glow around her skin seemed warm again, alive again. And in that quiet moment under the soft hum of the colony lights, Evan realized something powerful. Love didn't belong to humans or aliens. It belonged to anyone brave enough to hold on and strong enough to let go. For days after the ceremony, Lyra's home stayed quiet. The glow that once filled her walls dimmed, and the small silver dust circle where she had released her husband's essence still shimmered faintly, like moonlight that refused to fade. Evan visited her every evening after work. He didn't knock loudly, just a gentle tap on the door. Sometimes she answered, sometimes she didn't. He didn't blame her. Grief didn't leave quickly. It just changed its shape. On the third night, she finally opened the door. She looked tired but different, peaceful somehow. Her silver eyes were softer now, and her blue skin no longer looked pale with sadness. "I thought you might not open," Evan said gently. "I almost didn't," she admitted with a faint smile. "But I remembered you said you'd bring food." He laughed quietly and lifted the small box he carried. "Human comfort food, soup and bread. I didn't know if you'd like it. I've learned to like strange things," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. They sat together in her small home. The air still smelled faintly of the herbs she had burned during the ceremony. The orb, now empty of light, sat on a shelf near the wall. Lyra touched it once with her fingertips, a soft gesture full of tenderness. Evan broke the silence first. "How do you feel?" She looked at him thoughtfully before answering. "Quiet," she said. "It's strange. My people believe that after the return, there is silence inside the soul. But it's not the silence of loss. It's peace." "That's good," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "Is it? Humans seem afraid of silence. You fill it with words, with sound, with noise." He smiled faintly. "Maybe because silence reminds us of what we've lost." She nodded slowly, eyes drifting toward the faintly glowing dust circle. "Perhaps. For me, silence reminds me of what I've given back." As they ate, they talked. Small things at first. About work, about the colony, about the strange glowing plants that grew outside the dome. Then gently the conversation deepened. "Do humans bond like the Veyari?" she asked curiously. Evan thought for a moment. "Not exactly. We marry, but it's not the same. We don't share energy or connect minds like you do. We just choose to love." She studied him. "Choose?" He nodded. "Yes, love for us isn't automatic. It's a decision we make every day, to care for someone even when it's hard." Lyra smiled faintly. "That sounds harder than bonding." "Maybe it is," he said. "But maybe that's what makes it beautiful." Her silver eyes softened as she looked at him. "You humans carry pain differently," she said quietly. "You bury it deep, but somehow you still keep walking. Cale admired that about your kind." Evan looked down. He was right about one thing, and we don't stop. Even when it hurts, they fell silent again. The hum of the colony lights filled the air like a soft lullaby. Later, when Evan stood to leave, Lyra followed him to the door. "Evan," she said softly, "do you know why I asked you for help instead of another Veyari?" He shook his head. "No, I always wondered that." She looked at him gently. "Because humans are not afraid to break rules for love. My people would have told me to accept his death, to wait for the stars to take him. But you helped me bring him home. You did not ask for anything. You just cared." Her words caught him off guard. He didn't know how to answer. "I guess I just didn't want you to face it alone," he said finally. She smiled. "And that is why you are human, and why humanity has survived so much. You choose to stand beside others even when there's nothing to gain." Evan felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. No one had ever said something like that to him. Before he could speak, she stepped closer and touched his hand lightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for helping me when no one else would." Her touch was cool, but the warmth behind it was real. He smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me anymore." "I do," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Because that night, you didn't just help me find Cale. You helped me find myself again." When Evan walked back through the quiet corridors that night, he kept thinking about her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt something inside him change. A soft spark, small but alive. He realized that maybe this wasn't just Lyra's healing. Maybe it was his too. Sometimes helping someone else find peace could remind you what it felt like to be alive. As he looked back once more at her door, faint blue light flickered behind it, gentle like a heartbeat. And Evan smiled, knowing that love in any form never really ended. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the colony settled back into its quiet rhythm. For Evan, life didn't feel the same anymore. Something inside him had changed, something gentle but deep. The world that once felt small and dull now carried meaning again, and that meaning had a name: Lyra. He still visited her every evening after work. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in silence, drinking warm tea and watching the lights flicker across the colony dome. Their friendship had become a quiet comfort, a bond neither of them had planned but both had come to depend on. Lyra's home no longer felt filled with sorrow. She had begun to open her windows again, to let the artificial breeze in. Small glowing plants grew along her shelves, their soft light reflecting in her silver eyes. There was peace in her movements now, the kind that comes after long pain finally begins to fade. One evening, Evan arrived to find her standing on the balcony, looking up at the twin moons. Her blue hair moved gently in the soft wind. She turned when she heard him approach. "You always come at the same time," she said with a small smile. "Maybe I just like your tea," he teased lightly. Her smile grew a little wider. "Or maybe you like peace." "Maybe both," he admitted, leaning on the railing beside her. For a few minutes they stood there in silence, watching the sky. The stars above Theta 9 shone brighter than ever. Then Lyra spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Evan, do you know why the Vayari came to live among humans?" He turned to her, curious. "I always thought it was trade agreements or science exchange." "That's what everyone says." She shook her head slowly. "That's what your leaders tell you. But that's not the real reason." Her tone was calm, but her eyes carried something deep, something heavy with memory. "The truth," she said softly, "is that we came because we were dying." Evan frowned. "Dying?" "Yes," she continued. "Our world was not destroyed by war or greed. It was dying from emptiness and from silence. The Vayari live long lives, but we stopped growing. We stopped dreaming. We had technology, peace, and long years, but no passion left to guide them. Our hearts grew quiet." Evan listened carefully. Her voice was steady, but behind it was sadness. "Then," she said, "we found humans. We saw a species that lived loudly, that felt everything so deeply. Pain, love, anger, hope. You build homes even after losing them. You love again even after your hearts break. To us it was like watching light come alive in darkness." Evan looked down at his hands, speechless. "You make us sound better than we are," she smiled faintly. "No, just alive. You remind us of what we lost. That is why we came, not just to share our knowledge, but to remember what it means to feel." Her words struck him hard. He thought of how she had stood in the dust, singing to her lost husband, of how she had faced grief and still found peace, and of how she now looked up at the stars with calm courage. "You came to remember how to live," he said quietly. "Yes," she whispered, "and to learn how to love again." For a long time they said nothing. The hum of the colony and the faint whistle of the wind were the only sounds. Then Lyra turned to him, her voice softer now. "When Kyle died, I thought I had lost my reason to stay among humans," she said. "But you reminded me of it. You reminded me why we came here in the first place." Evan met her gaze. "I didn't do anything special," she shook her head. "You did something no Vayari would have done. You broke the rules for kindness. You risked yourself for another's peace. You gave meaning to my grief." He felt his chest tighten. "Lyra, anyone would have—" "No," she interrupted gently. "Not anyone. But you did." Her silver eyes shimmered faintly as she smiled. "Kale once said humans were born from chaos, but you turned it into love." I didn't understand what he meant until now. Evan didn't know how to respond. He just looked at her, the alien widow who had once come to his door with pain too heavy to carry, and now stood before him glowing with quiet strength. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of gratitude, of warmth, of something unspoken but real. When the wind grew colder, Lyra turned back toward her door. "It's late," she said softly. "You should rest." He nodded, taking one last look at the night sky. "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow." As he walked away, her voice reached him one last time. gentle like a memory. Evan, your kind has given my people a gift we will never forget. He turned slightly. What gift? She smiled faintly, eyes shining like the moons above. The gift of feeling alive. And as the door closed behind her, Evan realized something. For all the vastness of space, for all the alien worlds out there, maybe the greatest miracle wasn't in discovering new planets, it was in discovering each other. A month passed quietly after that night. The colony lived on as usual. Ships came and went, people worked, lights glowed softly against the cold metal walls. But for Evan, something had changed forever. He no longer felt alone in the endless silence of space. Every evening, he still found himself walking toward Lyra's home. Sometimes she would be waiting, smiling gently with her glowing eyes. Sometimes she would be lost in her thoughts, looking at the stars. Either way, she always welcomed him, and he always came. They talked about small things, human things, alien things. They laughed sometimes. Other times they sat quietly, saying nothing, because silence between them had become something sacred. But one evening when Evan came as usual, her door didn't open. He knocked softly once, twice, no answer. The soft blue light that always glowed from inside was gone. A strange feeling filled his chest. Worry, confusion, and something else. Fear. He pressed his hand against the door's panel and it slid open automatically. Inside, the house was dark but not cold. It was calm, too calm. On the center table, he saw a small glowing orb, brighter than he had ever seen before. It pulsed with slow, gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Beside it lay a folded piece of silver fabric and a letter written in her careful, flowing handwriting. Evan's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the letter. It began simply, "Evan, if you are reading this, it means I have gone." His throat tightened. "Do not be afraid. My time among humans was never meant to be long. The Vayari live differently than you. Our essence fades slowly after the return. It is the way of my people. A quiet ending after peace is found." He sat down slowly, eyes blurring with emotion as he read. "You gave me something I had lost, connection, warmth, and courage. You reminded me that even across stars, kindness still matters. You showed me what your people mean when they say love is a choice." Tears filled his eyes as he continued. "Kale's spirit is now one with the stars. Mine will soon follow. But I leave you this, a small part of my essence sealed in this light. It is not meant to keep me alive. It is meant to remind you that life continues, and that every act of love echoes beyond the limits of time and space." Evan stared at the orb. Its light was gentle, shifting colors like a living sunrise. "Do not mourn me, Evan. We are not meant to stay. We are meant to touch, to change, and to go. You have changed me, and through me, perhaps, my people will change too." At the bottom of the page, one last line was written in smaller letters. Simple and human. "Thank you for helping me remember what it means to live." Evan didn't realize how long he sat there, holding the letter against his chest. The orb's glow filled the room softly, washing everything in silver light. For the first time since the night they met, the silence felt heavy again, but this time it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of love left behind. He stood slowly and looked around her home, the little glowing plants, the empty shelves, the chair where she used to sit. Everything carried her touch. Then he picked up the orb and whispered, "Goodbye, Lyra." The light pulsed once, as if answering. Then it grew brighter, filling the whole room with warmth. It was soft, peaceful, and alive, like a final embrace. And just as quickly it dimmed to a small, steady glow. Evan placed it on the windowsill, where the moonlight could touch it. The next morning, people in the colony said they saw a new light appear in the sky, small, steady, and bright. Some thought it was just a reflection from a satellite. Others said it was something more. Evan didn't argue. He only smiled quietly and whispered her name under his breath whenever he looked up. He kept the orb beside his bed. It glowed gently every night, a soft reminder of a friendship that crossed worlds. Sometimes, when he worked late or walked home under the artificial stars, he would think about her words. "We are not meant to stay. We are meant to touch, to change, and to go." And he understood now. That was what being human meant. That was what being alive meant for both of them. Years later, when humanity built their first ship to the Vayari homeworld, They carried with them a message from Earth. It was written in simple words, signed by one man, Evan Cole. It said, "To the Veyari, you taught us silence. We taught you love. Between us may both forever live." And somewhere far above, among the countless stars, a small silver light shimmered, bright, calm, and eternal.